Data used to be seen as simply being, somebody's postal address, your first and last name, your telephone number, and then, your email address. But today, in the digital world, it's the photos that you're posting, it's the videos, it's your IP address and the cookies.
Marina, thank you so much for joining Dyggelskabby TV today. It's a pleasure to have you in our studio, so welcome.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to talk about a huge piece of regulation that's just around the corner. It's GDPR. So let's start. What is GDPR?
So GDPR is the European Union's new way of regulating data privacy. It's called the General Data Protection Regulation, and it's going to come into effect on May 25th, 2018. So certainly just on the horizon. It was actually, the bulk of it was passed 2 years ago, so giving companies time to prepare. But it's effectively going to be replacing legislation that has been first crafted in 1995. So it's a major overhaul to the current data practices that are in place, and it's effectively trying to adapt the regulatory environment to today's methods of marketing.
Mm-hmm. So that's what it is, but why is it needed?
Well, if you think of what has changed since 1995, I think the most important thing is data used to be seen as simply being, somebody's postal address, your first and last name, your telephone number, and then, your email address. But today, in the digital world, it's the photos that you're posting, it's the videos, it's your IP address and the cookies. So basically, data has, just become a much larger term. And certainly within the European Union, there is a strong tradition of protecting the privacy of the individual, and this is the European Union's response. I mean, it's very different to other markets worldwide, very contrarian to policies that are taken in the US and in Asia and other markets, but very important in the European Union.
Mm-hmm. So how will the GDPR regulations impact marketers and marketing activities?
Well, from a marketing perspective, it's really going to transform the complexity of how marketers are going to need to operate, because control is being handed back to the individual. And that's very important to bear in mind. Currently, much of what marketing does is working with a wealth of data to better understand where customers' interests are, to better serve targeted advertising. All of that will still be possible in the future, but companies will so they'll have to ask for specific consent first, and that will really dramatically change the way things are going to be working. In the past, it's very much been a trade-off, right? So you'll come to a website or to an app, and you'll have sort of a very general and generic question, which will say, in order to continue using this site, please click here. And that has been waiving effectively the rights in detail about your data privacy going forward. And that trade-off is going to not be possible anymore in its current form. It's going to need to be very specific so that people know what you as a company are going to be doing with their data before they give it to you.
Mm-hmm. So for the companies, what are sort of some things that they should be aware of as part of their sort of preparation for this implementation of GDPR on May the 25th?
Well, companies need to equip themselves and take some time to really digest the regulation. It's almost 100 pages, not quite. It has 99 articles. It's the most complex piece of legislation that the European Union has ever passed. So it is going to need time to find the right interpretation for the company in question. What it doesn't do is tell each and every company exactly what to do. So there's always that step an organization needs to do to make the right interpretation. You have to be lining up your IT teams, your data privacy teams, your marketing teams, your legal teams to be coming up with the best solution, and obviously the solution that is right for the customers. Certainly there's discussion that this can become challenging for small and medium-sized businesses, and there are certainly there are websites around, also from the EU, giving particular guidance for those types of companies who might not have an entire team of people to set in on this project.
So let's finish up a bit more personal maybe. Mm-hmm. in terms of yourself and at The Economist, what sort of things are you doing in preparation for GDPR?
Well, from our perspective, I mean, we have a privacy function that has been around for a number of years. So that team has been closely looking at this evolution as it's been coming along. I'm, partaking in the steering committee to be managing this process, and we currently have, very robust working teams, really making sure that we're covering all areas. Where we see real opportunity is to take a trust-first approach. We don't want to see this as, something where we are just responding to necessary legislation. We actually see it as an opportunity to be building a more, customer-first, trust-based relationship by being very specific and clear about the consent that we're looking to get. I think what the end result is probably going to be is that you'll have a smaller overall audience to market to, but that audience that you then have is very engaged and committed and actually wants to be hearing from you as an organization, and that is definitely going to be an advantage. I think the regulation, it stipulates quite specifically you need to be unambiguous in your wording, you need to be very clear about consent, and that overall is very much in line with The Economist in the sense that we are very clear and concise in our communication with our customers, so it's something we will be able to adapt well to.
Also, Marina, I hear there are some quite large fines associated with the GDPR. Could you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure. I mean, if there is actually a breach on data compliance, effectively you can be impacted by a fine of up to 20 million euros or 4% of your annual revenues, depending on which number is bigger. So I think the fines are definitely being put in place to just underline how serious this is for the European Union and really to ensure that companies do take steps to comply with the legislation.
Wow. Comply, everyone. That's a serious amount of money. Anyway, Marina, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us. It's an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
And thank you for watching. And if you'd like to find out more and keep up to date with all things GDPR, head over to dukascopy.tv.